Welcome, everyone, to this latest edition of the Not So Common podcast. I'm Pat Country, and this week, my guest is Jason Lindsay, otherwise known online as MetalJesusRocks. How you doing, Jason?
I am doing well, and it's weird for people to use my last name. It's most people don't know that.
Was that supposed to be private? I
No.
looked it up online. It's public information.
No, but it's funny because I'll do podcasts and people are like, should I call you Jason or Mr. Jesus, or how about just Metal? You know,
Mr. Jesus. So
Yeah.
you've been on YouTube since 2006. You got more serious in 2010. You do basically you're into the retro gaming scene as am I. You do buying guides. You do top tens for console games. You do hidden gems. You do game room tours. You do a lot on YouTube. You're very diversified, which we'll get into. But why don't you tell me how you first started out and getting serious on YouTube?
Yeah. So I think like a lot of people, you have that moment where you just kind of see other people and you get inspired. And so for me, I definitely saw people like Happy Console Gamer and Gamester81, and I liked what they're doing, but I also wanted to do my own spin on it. And so that was part of it. And also, too, I've always been a video and audio guy. So I've always done home movies, since I've been in high school. And then also I went to the University of Washington for audio production. I've actually worked in a real video and audio recording studio. And so when it came time for me to do YouTube, I was like, oh, well, I've already got experience with Pro Tools. At the time I was using Sony Vegas, Premiere, Final Cut, all that stuff. So that was easy for me to make the transition because I knew how that process works, microphones, all that sort of stuff. So it was just like, hey, YouTube, maybe I could do this for real. So once I did that in 2010, I was like, I know what it takes to be successful. Like, you can't just do it part-time or kind of willy-nilly. And so I basically made it as a second job. I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, it's one video a week, no exceptions, no excuses.
So at the time, were you still doing AV work on the side then for your quote-unquote real job or full-time job?
No, at that time, 2010, I might have either been working for my wife, who's a real estate agent, running around showing people houses, or trying to remember, or I was in IT help desk. And so I've been doing customer service IT help desk for an awful long time, pretty much starting at Sierra. Well, that's not true. At Sierra, I actually had a couple different jobs, but anyways, and so yeah, so I during the day I'd be helping people. I can't find any of my Excel files, or my monitor doesn't work right. That sort of stuff, fixing people's computers.
Was that directly for Microsoft, being in the Seattle area?
You mean as far as you mean like working for Microsoft?
Yeah, the help desk stuff.
Oh no, I didn't. I've never actually worked for Microsoft, even though I've obviously for many decades I've supported their products. But actually, at that point, I was probably working for a real estate company, but again for their IT help desk department.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so a lot of real estate people who were doing marketing stuff and accounting people, and I don't know where my files went. Where I didn't do anything. I don't know where they went.
Do I have a virus?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Oh man.
We're talking like, especially if you're doing that in the '90s when consumers first mass consumerism meeting the computer market, and then now you have a whole new generation or two of people facing the modern age, so to speak, of computers and PC. Sleuthing and figuring out what's an OS and how do I empty my recycle bin. I can imagine the horror show of that at the time.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because, in the 80s, I'm kind of self-taught. So I had a Commodore 64, taught myself how to program BASIC. And then in the 90s, obviously working at Sierra, pumping out video games for DOS and all that sort of stuff. But I always thought that people would grow into know how computers work. Like I thought, at the time I was like, okay, I'm kind of unusual. I know the difference between RAM and ROM and a hard drive. But I thought, okay, well, in the future, everyone's going to know. And it's funny because nowadays I realize that, wow, like nobody knows. You know what I mean? It's actually, they've gotten easier. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that I didn't anticipate the Apples of the world where, hey, we're going to take away buttons on your mouse and you're going to
hide system files from you, so you can't screw things up and destroy them.
Well, in many ways, it's very much like the car. I mean, how many people drive around every day not understanding a lick about how a combustion engine works? And they don't need to.
So it's interesting. I guess let's go back because I'm of a similar ilk, I believe, then, because I grew up with an IBM XT that my parents bought when I was like 4.5 or 5. So in the same way, if I wanted to play a game, yeah, I had to learn how to use DOS. I had to learn how to use commands. Yeah, boot disk, command lines. This is when you're 5 or 6. You have to force yourself to learn how to do that, even if you're writing down the instructions. Go into basic. Some games were executable, some were BAT files, some were EXEs, or you had to go into basic. You had that dreaded .bas, extension. So you had to somehow learn how to boot up into basic, load that game, and play what were usually very, pun intended, basic games. And for the most part, they were worse. But you had to learn how to differentiate. I remember there was one game, the Navy SEALs game, that was on a 3.5-inch floppy disk out there for those out there who are not familiar with what these things are, these terms that Jason and I will use. And I remember there wasn't enough was it high access RAM, I think it was?
Yeah. Back then you had conventional memory and you had extended memory.
Extended,
or expanded,
extended. Yeah. So I remember asking my dad, "Hey, Dad, the instructions tell you how to unlock all the extended RAM on here." So he had to spend one night reading up on his DOS book he had, whatever DOS it was at the time, 5.1 or whatever, and learn how to unlock this and do this for me just so I can play this one IBM DOS game. And I'm just thinking, like, those days are long gone, where you buy a game or any sort of software and you actually troubleshoot before you start the program. Like, that's sort of a bygone era. I don't think consumers nowadays understand that you really had to know your PC, at least the basics, in order to just run software on it.
Yeah, it's true. Like, I remember distinctly back in the mid-'90s, we published a bunch of people, and one of them was Papyrus, and they had NASCAR Racing, which at the time was a 640 by 480 NASCAR racing game, kind of a simulator or a simulation game. But it came on CD-ROM, and it needed so much conventional memory to run. It was like 588 kilobytes out of 640 that literally almost everyone who bought the game had to call us because we would make a boot disk. And what a boot disk was, it was a floppy disk that you would put in. It had system files on the floppy disk, and so you would basically configure your system during boot up to play a particular game. And the reason why NASCAR was such a pain in the ass is because in order to get it to run, you had to remove the mouse driver. You had to remove, in some cases, like if it was a compact Presario, you would have to remove the sound driver because the sound driver was so large that it literally would take up too much conventional memory. And so, but you'd have to keep the CD-ROM driver in memory because you needed the CD-ROM to run the game, or, it was just like, oh my God, it was a nightmare. And of course, you're dealing with customers who don't know how to even get around and format a floppy disk. It was crazy.
Sure. So again, I'm trying to just color this for people out there who don't realize that, when you bought a game, sometimes there'd be instructions for creating a boot disk in order to run it, which would basically eliminate everything on the computer that you would not need, basically loaded into memory at the time when you booted up your computer.
Yeah, just because temporarily, right?
Yeah, because either your computer didn't have the RAM to run it, or like you said, there could have been some disruptive settings of drivers of other, whether it's the sound card, like you said, the mouse, where this is basically the clean boot of the system, clean startup, where we're just running the game and that's it. And when you're done with it, you got to restart your computer to do whatever else you want to do afterwards.
Yeah, it was a crazy time. Not only that, but just drivers in general.
Oh my God! You had to look up, like, okay, what was it? The IRQ settings for like your sound card. And this is with Sierra games. At least Sierra's gave you like a nice little GUI interface when you were installing stuff. But then you had to like experiment with different IRQs, and your games could just basically crash randomly.
Well, yeah,
like you're playing Space Quest, and they'll just crash.
Yeah. So what Pat's referring to there is that it's an interrupt request is what that is. And so back in the day, your motherboard, and again, I'm more of a software guy. I'm not a hardware guy. And so, but basically, basic simple computers back then had assignable IRQ settings that would allow hardware to interrupt what is going on in the computer. And so you would have, 1 through 10 or 1 through 11 or whatever, and you'd have different pieces of hardware assigned to an IRQ. And Sound Blaster cards were typically either 5 or 7. But sometimes those could be used up by other pieces of hardware from the manufacturer. That's why you had other options for them, because there wasn't really a standard. And yeah, you could have crashes because some piece of hardware would come along, let's say a printer or I don't know, some other device that would interrupt what you're trying to do, which was push sound to the speakers. And so, my God, thank God for Windows. Windows 98 wasn't much better, but at least Windows 2000 on Microsoft solved the IRQ problem. No one cared about it anymore. You didn't have to set it in the BIOS when you booted up the machine. Life is much better.
Oh yeah, I remember. Well, 95 was buggy as hell because that was the first big major breakthrough. Okay, let's try to run DOS on top of
we made games
Windows.
For it. It was a nightmare.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that transition period. We're going off topic here, but I reference this because I remember seeing one of your videos, a game, for example, like Privateer 2, which I loved. And I remember they came out with that quote-unquote deluxe edition. And I had the original one, which just ran out of DOS directly. The deluxe edition then said, we can run this out of Windows 95. It never worked properly. Compared to the original. So I would just go back, and I know the deluxe one had little things they tried to improve, but I remember buying it and figured this is garbage compared to the original because it was much cleaner just running it in DOS, not having to deal with all, crashing into Windows. Like it could crash in DOS, but it would crash more into Windows more likely if you were playing that deluxe version that was quote unquote made for Windows 95. And so and they couldn't figure it out totally until I guess Windows 98 were like, okay, now we kind of have this figured out.
Yeah.
Or if we're going to run something in Windows, it's going to actually run in Windows, not crash back out.
Well, the problem with Windows is that Windows 95 and Windows 98, Windows 98 SE were basically just shells put onto the top of DOS. So you have 386s, 486s, which really aren't that powerful when you look back, trying to essentially run 2 operating system, quote unquote. Not really, but they basically were running DOS with a shell. And so that's an awful lot to expect from a PC back in the day. By the way, then we're also going to push top of the line graphics at you and sound effects and CD-ROM audio. It was just too much. It was too much to handle. And again, it wasn't really until Windows 2000 that I think Microsoft finally figured out, okay, DOS is gone. You know what I mean? So let's not try to run both. But it took a while. It's hard for Microsoft because they even run into this today, is that you have a bunch of government contractors that write really old software for 10,000 employees spread across, wherever. And it's like you can't just update the operating system. You have to keep supporting that old stuff, So.
Sure. So let's talk about, we mentioned your time at Sierra. And most people, even people that didn't grow up with computers, know that Sierra is one of the most famous computer game companies out there, at least in the 80s and 90s. So how did you start with there? What did you originally do?
Yeah, so the story, I wish it was more glamorous than it is, but basically, I went to school for computer science, and I was learning how to program. And sitting around one day with my roommate, I saw an ad in the Seattle Times for an accounts receivable person at Sierra, and it had their logo, and I was like, what? And the thing to know about this story is that back in 1989 or 90, Excel and other accounting applications really weren't that popular. I don't even know if they were really around. And so most programmers that wanted to make a decent living needed to know how to make accounting software. So a couple hours every single day, I was learning accounting. And so here's Sierra with an ad in the paper looking for an accountant. I'm like, well, I can do that. So I at the time, I had a color printer, which was kind of unusual. So I printed off their logo on my resume. So my resume actually had their logo printed on it in color. And dropped it off. They called me back not even a day later, and they're like, "We want you to come in."
They figured you could figure that part out. Yeah. You might know what you're doing.
Yeah, and so it was really weird. So I didn't know. I knew who Sierra was, but I didn't know. I just assumed they were over here in Bellevue, Washington. Well, no, it turns out actually that they're from Oakhurst, California, but they are moving their corporate headquarters up here, and they'd only moved 3 people, and that was the accounting people. Well, I had maybe 4, 3 accounting people and 1 network IT guy. because they basically were building out the network to start shipping their employees from California. And so I got a job on the ground floor. There was nobody there. It was just a small team of people. And I did that for about a year before then I could go into the technical support department. And that's whenever I did the help desk stuff. And then also I wrote articles. I was in a couple video games. And back then you did a little of everything at Sierra. And that was my way of getting in the door.
Sure. Oh, real quick, what games did you make an appearance in?
Well, probably nothing you'll recognize, but it is actually a good one. It's called Shivers 2. And
Shivers 2, not familiar with that one.
Yeah, it's funny because at the time, full motion video games obviously were taking off in the mid-'90s, and Myst blew us away. We're like, oh crap, here's an adventure game that we could have made. And so we went into full production mode, making a bunch of full motion video games that most people don't even remember. Like we did a Rendezvous with Rama, and we did Lighthouse. We did all these weird games. But anyways,
I remember Lighthouse.
Yeah, and so it came out around that time, the Phantasmagoria era, and it's called Shivers 2. And they needed a long-haired rocker dude to play guitar because the game is about a band that gets kidnapped, and it's actually a decent game, and I'm in it, and we went out to Eastern Washington, shot a bunch of music videos and stuff that give the player hints, and you see me with the long hair rocking out.
Nice. I was going to get into the mix of your music with retro games in a bit, but explain the time at Sierra. I mean, we're talking a company that literally started by a couple, Ken and Roberta Williams. It grows up into this huge, just mega power when it comes to computers and especially gaming in the 80s. What was that like? Did it still have sort of that small company feel, but all of a sudden, you're playing with the big boys? Yeah, I'm guessing sort of like the Apple feel, where it's like, all right, we're a big corporation, but we're basically at the heart, we're sort of down to earth, and we look out for each other.
Yeah, so when I started there, absolutely, we were not a publicly traded company yet, and so it was owned by Ken and Roberta Williams, and it's also important to know that the reason why they moved him from Oakhurst, California, which is a town of I think 10,000 people, to Seattle, was because they were having a hard time hiring, because Sierra was growing so rapidly that they were dominant on PC, and even when I worked there, we were larger than EA at the time. And we were larger than Activision. We were the largest. And so, but the reason why that happened is because they moved the corporate headquarters up to the Puget Sound area, so that way they could get developers. Microsoft was taking off. Nintendo was here. There's a bunch of energy here, and they could get people in the door that would want to work and work on video games. So that's why they did that. And yeah, when I worked there, it was absolutely felt that way in the very beginning, for sure. You knew people who were in the marketing department. I would hang out and have lunch with people who were doing the music for some of the educational titles. It was just this energy that, you knew that it was a great place to work. I loved everything we did, and then I don't know how much you want to get into this, but then things did change. That they went public, and that's when I almost immediately within a year saw things change, where all of a sudden games were shipping because of the you have to do quarterly earnings. And so I remember distinctly, we shipped games that were broken, that were unplayable, that literally, to give you an idea, like King's Quest VII, which was a Windows game, big title, beautiful artwork. That game is pretty much broken as we shipped it. So we actually had to put a patch in on it. So the game came out on CD-ROM, but we had to shove a floppy disk in the box just so people could finish the game. Another high-profile game called was it Outlast? No, that's what I was playing the other day. Outpost, sorry. So Outpost is like a strategy game. Literally, you can't finish that game. And that's because we went from a family-owned, we'll ship it when it's ready, to, oh my God, quarterly earnings. We got to make the holiday deadlines. And we definitely started to see quality suffer at that point. That was the beginning of the end, unfortunately. But for a while, it was awesome to work there.
So that was that 96 when it was sold? Was that after it was publicly traded? They sold it?
Well, yeah. So what happened was that Ken took it public, and then what happened is that, and he's talked about this in his blog and stuff, is that when you are a CEO of a publicly traded company, your job is to make money for stockholders. Okay?
Yes.
At that point, your focus is not actually the customer. You are legally required by the FCC to make money for stockholders, and so at that point, I think it's CUC came to us, which was this mega conglomerate that I think they own Seagrams and all sorts of stuff. They basically offered double the stock price. So at that point, his job is to make money for the stockholders, and if you can double everybody's investment, you are supposed to take that, and that's exactly what he did. The other thing that also happened too at the time, it's important to remember that in the late 90s, everybody was talking about the internet. The internet was this big thing. That's when AOL merged with Time Warner. Sony got into the movie business, and everyone was trying to jump on what's the next big thing, right? And so it wasn't unusual for a lot of companies to go, oh yeah, we need to be in the software thing. We need to have video games, this and that. So they were building up the portfolio. However, what happened was that people didn't realize that company was cooking the books to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. And so and it had nothing to do with Sierra at the time. It basically was just like they were lying CUC and all that. And so they basically had to sell off all their assets and fire people.
And that brought, I guess, the end to Sierra as we knew it.
Yes.
Unfortunately, you fired a lot of the people that were there since mostly the beginning, like Scott Murphy, Outlaw, gone. People that created the franchises that basically built the company, like Space Quest
and we're
Leisure
still
Larry.
making money. So I've talked about this on my channel a lot. One of my favorite subsidiaries of Sierra was Dynamics. Dynamics made Willy Beamish. They also made Rise of the Dragon, but they also made Red Baron and Earth Siege and Star Siege and Tribes and blah blah blah. It just goes on and on. They're fantastic developers. They did consistent quality for well over a decade. They let them go. It's like, so you don't do that to people who are rock stars, who are making great games, who are making great money. Most people, even if you don't necessarily, you're not a gamer from the 90s, you go, oh, I remember playing Tribes. Tribes was awesome. Yeah, of course, because that was way ahead of its time. Just an example of the stupidity that happened at that time. It was shocking to see.
So the company gets broken up. You're there till the end?
No, I wasn't. So I saw the writing on the wall. Some of my friends did. My wife was the first person to leave. She was the smartest of all of us. And then I left, I think, about a year later. And then my buddy Drunken Master Paul, I think he was there to the bitter end because he actually went on to work at One.net, which was kind of like an online thing. Ken Williams also tried doing like an online internet radio thing, which Paul was a part of. And so through him, I got to kind of hear and see the crash and burn in all its glory. So,
do you think you can't obviously speak for him, but you think looking back, if he knew it was going to happen, that Ken Williams wouldn't have went public with the company, would have tried to keep it sort of together? Not saying it would have lasted a huge amount longer, but at least it would have continued in some way, shape, or form for probably years afterwards.
People have asked him that, and he's actually brutally honest. I mean, his answer is basically, I want to say he walked away with like $500 million or something like that. It was,
sure.
And I mean, to give you an idea, like when you look up Ken Williams today, like on social media, all you see is pictures of him and his wife on his massive yacht, living on the water and living the dream. So I although I do think, that said, I don't know him. So I suspect he probably would love to be in it now. That was a crazy time for Sierra too, because we really struggled with 3D games. We were traditional 2D adventure games, and we had some arcade games here and there, but Dooms and Quakes and all that stuff, and we just struggled. And so I think in some ways he's maybe glad that he got out of it. Well,
that brings up a great point, which I guess which way Sierra was going was also the way of PC gaming in general in the 90s, because PC gaming traditionally, since its inception, was geared towards adults. Since adults were the ones that bought computers, they're the ones that understood it. And consoles, up until probably even the late 90s, were geared towards the teenage and child market, since it was easier for them to understand. You get a cartridge, you put it in, you plug in controller, you play. No IRQ settings to deal with, no boot disk, etc. So games were always from the Sierra side, these were adult titles. Games like Space Quest, Leadership Larry, Police Quest, the big ones, King's Quest. These were for children. While children could enjoy them, and I did enjoy Space Quest as a child, they were written by and for adults for the most part. And so the adventure game genre, which was always associated with adults, by the mid '90s, yes, it started to lose out. Like you said, you had games like, for example, Wolfenstein 3D, which, by the way, it's the 25th anniversary coming up already. You had this sort of shift as the consumer market trended towards, okay, now a computer in every home. That means now children should be playing computer games more, and that's how they began to be marketed more in teenagers. And so maybe, like I said, not sure if Sierra would still be in the same power it was, today. Probably not. It probably would have, in terms of market share, gone down just naturally because of the trending in gaming in general on computers.
Yeah, Sierra dipped its toes in consoles, so you can go out there and find Coleco cartridges, and they never did very well.
Atari computer stuff, sure.
Yeah. You'll see it as a Sierra Vision or Sierra Online and stuff like that. So they dipped their toes in it, but yeah, absolutely. It was never. Also, too, on the PC, we tried for a while. We did a series of games, KAA, which Ken Williams said stands for Kick-Ass Action, and we had a couple PC games that were designed to be arcade, kid-friendly, like Hunter Hunted was one of those games. We did a fighting game and some other stuff. We had some stuff like The Incredible Machine and things like that. But to your point, like, for instance, we tried to do 3D in a big way because we saw the future coming. Like, for instance, the last Gabriel Knight 3 is a full 3D game. The last King's Quest game, well, before the reboot, King's Quest 8 is a full 3D game, and they're just not good. And they're just not. And it's because we didn't know what to do there. And so, would it continue on? The one thing I would say is that Sierra was very smart about publishing as well. So we made our own games, but we also published people like, for instance, Papyrus. We published the first Half-Life. Valve came to us. We helped name it, actually. And then also, like, Blizzard came to us for one of the Diablos. And so, like, we were able to buy Diablo in the Sierra store for a while. And so I would say that based on that, Sierra probably would have continued on as a publisher. It depends on what kind of talent you get in to actually do the program themselves. And you still see that. Like, every once in a while, someone will come up to me with like a Sierra game on the PlayStation 2. Do you remember working on this? No, that was not the Sierra that you know and love. That's a name. It's actually owned probably by, well, for a while it was a French company, and then what was it? And then and I think Activision owns the name now. It's only a name. Nobody works there. Nobody that.
Oh, sure. And then the various properties are split between different companies and bought out between different companies at this point. I would love to buy the Space Quest trademark just to try to bring it back.
Oh, I know. I mean,
there's a market. There's still a market there.
Yes.
I'm not saying it's the size it was 25 years ago. There's a market there. Didn't they do a Kickstarter? Scott Murphy, Mark Crow, they did a Kickstarter for a Space Quest type of game.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that ever came out, but you had the Leisure Suit Larry remake that came out, which I hear mixed things about, but it was successful enough on Kickstarter. So again, there is a market out there for some of these properties still. They try to do the King's Quest game. I'm not sure though if the name carried weight though with the younger generation of game players, but there's still a market.
Yeah, there was also a Kickstarter for the Police Quest series, but again, they don't have license to the name, and so it's kind of in one of those limbos where it sort of has to be word of mouth, and it's hard. I think I don't think any of those were necessarily super successful, and I get the feeling it's because too much time has languished. You know what I mean? Like, some people remember it, but I just think it's tough to kick. I don't know. It's sad.
Oh wow, that's kind of a downer. I love Sierra, right? You're just like, yep, it's just sad. All right.
Well, you know what I've been doing though, like. I've been trying to buy up all the games, and so that's been one of my goals.
Oh, segue into PC game collecting.
Well, in for that reason, because I didn't keep them at the time, they were fairly worthless. You couldn't give them away, and nowadays, my God, it's like trying to find some of those obscure Sierra titles and big box complete is tough and expensive.
I threw away. I kept all the CD-ROMs and discs for the most part. I think, for example, was it Dynamics that did Goblins? I had
No, it was the French company. But yes, I remember Goblins.
But it was Sierra published, though, correct?
Yes, yeah, we did.
So I had Goblins too, and I remember I threw out all the boxes to all these games I had.
Yeah.
Up until I bought a lot of PC games up until the late '90s and early 2000s. So yeah, Dark Forces, I had the original box. All those original Sierra games, I had the boxes for. Police Quest 3, Space Quest. I used to actually buy them all as an aside. For some reason, you know where they ended up in the bargain bin at? KB toy stores would have PC titles. We're talking late 80s, early 90s, and that's where I got, for example, Space Quest 3 was in the bargain bin there. I'm sure it was a few years old at that point, and I got the EGA version of it. I'm not sure if they had a VGA one or not, but I got the EGA version of it. And they had a lot of stuff in there, and that's where I was like, oh, it's marked down for $15 or so, something like that. And you can pick up some good titles that were a few years old. And that's how I sort of expanded my sort of PC gaming. You don't get a lot of money on $2 a week allowance or a few dollars a week allowance, so you have to spend it wisely. And this is right before computer shows too, which I can get into. I always love talking about the computer shows and how that was sort of out of time, and that's something I'll probably never return as well. But yeah, I think collecting PC games is sort of this movement that's happened more the last 2 or 3 years that I've seen, and I don't think it would ever catch on like retro gaming in general has caught on for lots of reasons. But it's good that people are trying to seek these games out. I know you're one of the people. I've been doing it for a while, and it's a very strange world.
Yeah, it is. It's strange because some games will cost you 50 cents and some will cost you 300. You know
Yes.
what I mean? And I mean it's really I think in the the Nintendo Genesis area, I think the prices are maybe a little bit more even, but man, in PC gaming, oh my God, it's there's a handful of $300-$400 games out there on the PC, and then everything else is cheaper, maybe not 50 cents, but it's all over the place. But also too, to be fair, there are tens of thousands of games,
Oh, sure.
Depends on what you count into that. If you want to count Commodore, Atari ST, Amiga,
And by and large, the difference with PC gaming is that it's run mostly on demand in terms of popularity versus rarity. A game like Wolfenstein 3D, which they sold a ton of,
yeah.
Even going back and trying to buy the shareware versions of those titles will cost you. And there's probably millions that exist still,
right?
In some shape or form. But if you want to, for example, someone came up to me at a convention and he gave me this game that, a regional title, sort one of those sort of what's the best way to compare it to? We had Key Punch software. I'm not sure if I spoke about this. You were the regional small boxes that are 4 by 6 inches, where it was a collection of games, 4 on 1 5 1/4 floppy. They would sell them in bookstores in New Jersey, maybe New York, but it was totally not nationwide. It was probably a few different regions. So this guy gives me a regional game like this, where it's in this little blister pack, and I'm saying to myself, I will never see this game again.
Right.
This is complete. It's in a package. They probably sold a few hundred of these back when it came out. This game is extremely rare. This is a preservation of history. It's also absolutely worthless because no one wants it.
Right.
And that's the key difference. If it's any console at all, any retro game console, where there's one game that's hard to find, automatically it's worth money. Well, automatically, but not at computers.
Well, and I think the reason for that, one good reason is that it's impossible to get a complete PC collection. It's impossible.
Sure.
Because what do you mean? Are you talking about the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, 2010s? Are you talking IBM/Tandy? Are you talking Apple II? Are you talking Commodore? Are you talking Atari computer? Yeah, it's complicated. So it's complicated. No one can do it. I mean, even Commodore had 10,000 titles that were officially programmed for it. So nobody tries to do that. So instead what you do is you try to build up a collection of the games that you love the most. Although, as a side note, Commodore is incredibly tough to collect for because most people pirated them. So yes, you would have a game that was really popular, but nobody bought it. So there may only be 5 copies of that game out there. A great example of that is an awesome game called Space Taxi. really, really want that game, doesn't come up on eBay very often. Complete, almost never. And it's like, but yet everybody played that game. Same thing with the Great Guiana Sisters, a Mario clone on Commodore 64. Love to own a copy of that. I had a copy of it as a kid on a, bootleg floppy disk. But now, of course, I want a real copy, and it's like impossible. It's pretty funny.
It's also impossible, and there are even, what is it? I think it's like the DOS project. They're trying to even just catalog, just catalog every DOS program, and just to get a version of it archived online, and not just games, whether it's spreadsheets or any other software. And that's going to be close to impossible, because a lot of these releases were mom and pops. Like I said, a lot of them are either regional companies or smaller. For example, someone like Richard Garriott with Aqualabeth. High schooler gets his game into, one local game store. Right. And that's it. Technically, that game was released. Technically, that's released. And there's not many copies that exist in that original form. Of course, then it gets re-released, and then he goes on and bigger and better things. But think about, that's the success story versus the thousands of ones that no one cared about or sold only a couple of copies of.
Yeah, no, it's true. And actually, you mentioned Aqualabeth. Is that how you pronounce that? That's one of the rarest PC games out there. I mean, for those that don't know, it basically came out in a baggie. Yeah. It did not have a box, but it came out, and it had a label and it had a manual, and it's considered Ultima Zero essentially. And so if you are going for a complete Ultima collection, you have to own that. And yeah, you can spend $1,000 to $3,000
because there's less than 50 of them. How many were actually sold? Richard Garriott probably has a few left laying around outside his spaceship, but I mean, it's just one of those strange things. I was trying to track down. I'm still trying to track down soft porn. The early text adventure, sort of the predecessor to Leisure Suit Larry, by online at the time. Online Systems was even Sierra yet.
And it has naked Roberta Williams on the cover.
Well, she's in a jacuzzi, but
close. It's damn. I remember we'd look at that because we were, employees would be like, "Holy crap, that's our boss."
Yeah, but good luck me finding a version of that in the box. How many of those do you think still exist? 100? That are out there?
I know.
I sometimes you talk to these collectors like, "Oh yeah, I owned a couple of those back in the day," and it's like it's insane that. I think you have those very few people that held on to all these things. Otherwise, you're never going to find them.
No, and honestly, I mean, I used to have a massive big box collection, and then you move a couple times, right? And you're like, screw this, you know what I mean? And then, of course, now I have the space, and so I hope to never get rid of those things. But man, it's painful,
Do you concern yourself with the different versions? For example, I have Ultima 1 through 4 all complete in box, but I think Ultima 2 is like Atari computer, one of them's Commodore, the other two are either Apple or IBM. Do you care about that as much, or you're just lucky to get one version of it, in the package?
Yeah, I don't. I'm just like you. I don't worry about it. My big box PC collection is really all over the place too, and the reason for that is very simple: is that usually it doesn't matter. I mean, the only difference is really that little label that's on the corner and what the label is on the floppy disks. And so and what I really care about is the box, the map, the manual, and all that stuff is usually exactly the same. So that's how I am. Although there are some games, because I was such a big Commodore 64 freak, I would love to get on the Commodore, but again, it's like impossible. So I'll take the Atari XT version or Amiga.
Oh, sure. I just want to try to get it's like records. You get the first edition of the game, for example, because Sierra re-released King's Quest 3 times.
Oh, shit, at least.
So I don't think I have the first version. I probably have the 87, EGA remake or VGA remake, so I don't have the original version. Right. You don't want the version with the 3.5 lobby, you just want the 5 1/4 one, from what was King's Quest 84 originally, something like that. So, but that's where I'm at my quote unquote career, in terms of PC collecting. But why do you think I don't want to say it's not blown up, but gotten to even a respectable amount? Because even 3-4 years ago, I'd go to retro gaming conventions in Portland, and you'd have maybe a couple guys with big box PC titles, and no one was looking at them besides maybe me and one other person. No one cared about them. So what do you think's happened the last few years, besides people like you ruining the market for everyone by saying, "Oh, I'm collecting them, you should too"?
It's funny you mention that, because I remember at one of the early Portland Retro Gaming Expos, I remember the first time I met you there.
2010.
You and I were you were looking. I think you held like a Police Quest game or something like that in your hand. I was like, ooh, because I wanted it, but I think you bought it.
Did I? I don't remember that. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, no worries
The,
at all, man.
the
But
original Police Quest.
yeah, something like that. I remember. But it's hard to say. I think that. Well, I think what it is, it's the people who obviously grew up with PC games, who are starting to appreciate, what came with those things and what those are. I was hanging out with Reggie I was hanging out with Reggie just the other day, and I was surprised to learn that even Reggie, who is I think 10 years younger than me, looks back fondly at the PC, and he looks back. He was obviously very young, but. He was, he's telling me that he loved Phantasmagoria, and I was just like, oh, he never talks about that, but it was cool to see. It was cool to hear, and I was like, oh, okay. So I guess my point is I think that the PC appreciation market is actually bigger than people realize. It's just that it's so scary for people to go back and try to get those to run that I think for the vast majority, most people don't. But myself, I am definitely looking. I am on eBay looking to get a couple choice titles for my collection, and I definitely look at Expos, but even though, like, I go to Portland, there are tables, but I don't get the sense that a lot of people are looking for games. I think it used to be 2 people, now there's 5, you know what I mean? But we do buy up almost everything that we see that we don't have.
Because I think at this point, it really is a preservation.
Yes.
First and foremost. The difference between retro game collecting is that a large chunk will want to play the games that they buy. Maybe not everyone. You have, of course, all the term like shelf collector. But the preservation of the games when it comes to computers, Apple, etc., is, like you said, the things that came with them, the maps, the feelies, the workarounds to copyright, those things are going to be lost. All the games are online, and they've been re-released. You can play them all. You can download them in one way or fashion. Like I said, there's even like DOS Project, where even these esoteric games, quote-unquote abandonware, you can find the actual game software, and that's preserved, but everything that came with it is not. So, like, yes, like for my example, soft porn. Yeah, they re-released that with Leisure Suit Larry, one of the collections. You can play it online probably right now. But good luck finding like the original instruction manual.
Right.
Good luck finding the box. That's to me what's the important part. I think people are trying to fill in the blanks right now.
Yeah, no, it's true. Like, people bitch and moan because they can't find a copy of some NES game, and I laugh because I'm like, try finding a copy of Battle Bugs, okay? Or some weird, like Gabriel Knight 1 with the twisty box is impossible to find. It'll cost you $300 to $400, and you're going to compete for it. You know what I mean? Because there literally might only be 10 copies in. I don't know.
There was a twisty box? I didn't even know that.
Yeah, there's a version of it that's a puzzle, and it's a twisted box. If you look it up, if you look Gabriel Knight 1 and the first release of that is this really weird shaped box that it's not even square at all.
What is it? What's the other one? Starcross. They had that plastic UFO packaging where they actually was shaped like a UFO, and it's very hard to find. It was brittle. They couldn't put it on shelves because they couldn't balance it because it's a freaking shaped like a saucer. That's one of the more coveted, I guess, weird, PC games from back in the day. That's a variant, and so yeah, I guess you're right. Like we have to find these things that are not thrown out.
I know, it's crazy, and also too. It used to be much easier to go to half-price books and some of these other places that would stock them, but key codes killed that. And so they're scared, basically, because now while most of the games I collect don't have key codes, but anything from the 2000s on, those stores can't sell them because the key codes might be used.
For people that don't know, once you reached a certain point to combat piracy, when you bought a game in a PC store, you were basically just buying the code inside so you can actually register to run it.
Yes.
So when you go to swap meets or flea markets nowadays, don't buy any PC game from, I'd say, 99, 2000 on, because it probably won't run. Buy it if you want to collect it, but not to actually play it, because it probably you won't be able to get it to work without cracking it, because that serial number's been used already.
Right, and so that killed the resale market for most retro game stores, pawn shops, and thrift stores, because they don't know or care enough to really distinguish between the two, and so they would basically just have customers come back. I can't get this to work. It doesn't work. You sold me something that doesn't work. And so at that point, a couple of years ago, they're just like, fine, we're just not going to stock PC games anymore. And so we see that. I mean, Kelsey, who runs Pink Gorilla, that's exactly what she told me. She doesn't know enough about it, doesn't care enough about it, to it's not her thing, and so they just don't do it. So that makes it very difficult. The only place you can really get PC games is at garage sales if you're very lucky, Expos, and eBay. That's it.
Which is why the difference between retro games is that every year, going to these retro game conventions, you see younger kids that want to play these older consoles. You can't do that with old PC games. It's very complicated. It's a lot harder to spread the knowledge and spread the gameplay experience to a new generation and go back and say, oh yeah, play the first King's Quest game. How are we going to do that? Well, get your old XT out, dust it off, boot it up, and make sure the software runs, show the kid how to type in commands. It's a learning process, and it's a lot harder than getting out your NES, blowing in the cartridge, and playing Super Mario Brothers. It's so we might be that sort of last generation that really appreciates these games. Yeah, like it might actually die out with us to some degree. Like these are going to be relics 100 years from now. Remember those old PC games? It's going to be like, I don't know, before you had records, you had those tubes they played in the players, you know what I mean? Like the original Edison player. That's what these PC games might become.
Yeah, it's true. Although thankfully, I guess to end up on a higher note, that's one of the reasons why I do love GOG.com. And I absolutely, to your point, like, when I buy these PC games at like a garage sale, whatever, I don't care if it works, because I know that I can go on GOG.com and pretty much download so much of this. It's optimized for Mac and Windows 10, even Linux, And so if I want to play the game, the good news is it's archived. But so that there is some solace in that.
Sure, I think in terms of the PC collecting market, like you said, you're right. It's almost immaterial if some of these games will run or not. If I find that Starcross weird UFO packaging, I'm not going to care if the disc works or not. I'm buying it for the packaging. You know what I mean? That's why I'm buying it. I can always recopy the floppy if I want to, or do like when you find PC games nowadays. When I find an Ultima, someone's already pre-copied back from 20 years ago. They already copied it just in case, which is what we did back in the day too. But good old PC collecting. Well, you like spreading the love of that as well as retro games in general. So, let's talk about your channel a bit, because it's definitely gained in popularity year after year. Ever since when I first met you in 2010 at the very small and sweaty Portland Retro Gaming Expo when it was underneath the parking garage.
I think I actually met you before that, Pat. Do you remember?
Before 2010?
Well, Cheesecake Factory. Do you remember that?
In 2010?
I don't remember, but it was PAX, and there was a meetup at the Cheesecake Factory across the street.
That was 2011. That was a year later.
Oh, okay.
But I don't think it was a Cheesecake Factory. It was like a restaurant. Was it a Cheesecake Factory? Wow, that was the weekend I premiered the NWC Championship video with James. Yeah, that was definitely the next year. We first met in 2010. Yeah, but I do remember that you were there. Gamester was there. I do remember that. Yes. Yeah.
So I'm sorry. Please continue.
As an aside, we're trying to mix up our dates. We're both old. That's the point.
Oh God, I'm terrible about that stuff.
So your YouTube channel, it's a success, and you've sort of done well, I think, in branching out. You have several different types of videos. Whether, like I said before, it's like pickup videos, room game collection tours, hidden gems, buying guides, which I think are useful, and people like how to get into collecting certain games. But you also spotlight others that other friends on your channel. So but that's not common for a YouTube channel to do. I love to pick your brain on your decision to do that and to sort of branch out. It's not just featuring yourself, but others. Yeah,
absolutely. So I early on, I realized that I did not want to be, I didn't want to pretend like I knew everything. And so, there's 40 plus years of video game knowledge, and I wanted to be able to cover all of it. And while I have my niche, obviously I know PC games, and I have stuff over here that I know. I play the PlayStation 4 almost every day, the Switch, all that stuff. But I realized early on that why should I have to try to do all this myself? And so I reached out to John Hancock. I happened to live next to one of the biggest, most impressive game collectors in the country, and that is the immortal John Hancock. He has 11,000 games. He has 25 complete U.S. collections, and so I was like, well, shit, let's bring John on and let's see if we can do some videos together. And it just kind of expanded from there. Kinsey, Kelsey, Reggie, Drunken Master Paul. I'm a people person. I like hanging out with people. I like that energy. It is so much easier to have somebody standing next to you to riff off of.
Oh, sure.
Than to try to fill up the space. You know this on your podcast, right? When Ian's talking, you are formulating the next thing that's going to happen and vice versa. And so it seems to flow better. I love it. I mean, I just think it's so much more dynamic. You get a bunch more personalities and knowledge in there. And I'm happy that they want to do it too. And they've all been very grateful as they kick off their own YouTube channels. So
they're basically you're piling them for their own YouTube careers. You're like spitting them off like, Laverne and Shirley off of Happy Days. Right? Is that basically
Joni loves
too old a
Chachi
reference? Joni loves Chachi. Oh, Joni just died. Rest in peace. The actress just died.
That's true.
But so you're of the rare variety then of YouTuber for two reasons. You admit you don't know everything about the topic you want to discuss, and also you don't mind sharing that spotlight. You realize that hey, what I'm doing, it's good to sort of spread the love out to other people, get them involved, create more of a community feeling at the same time while also educating and having fun. And I think that's an important part because I think oftentimes with YouTube, you're stuck in the, one producer, one man show. And I think that's limiting not only in terms of creativity, but also over time, you can burn yourself out doing that, which is what I've struggled with. Was one of the reasons why I wanted to do a podcast and do one and having Ian on the channel, because it gives me a chance to bring someone else in another perspective that I may not always agree with, but also keeps things fresh at the same time. So you've managed to find that balance, I take it.
Yeah, I have. And also too, over the years, each one of those people have really contributed to the channel in big ways. And also, to be fair, while I always look at it as sort of my name on the door, it's my YouTube channel, and I'm ultimately responsible for the content of it. But when we go into videos, I definitely want it to be a collaborative effort. I'm interested in what they have to say. I want to know what their ideas are. And I really want it to be a team effort, and we definitely do that, and that's what I think makes it really fun. And then in general, what happens is that like for instance, Reggie comes over and we shoot 3 to 4 videos in one day, and then maybe 2 days later, Kelsey will come over and we'll shoot a couple videos, 3 to 4 videos, maybe something like that. And so I always have a big backlog of videos to work on, capture the gameplay footage, edit, create thumbnails, all that sort of stuff. But it allows me to then, if I have 20 videos sort of in a can, then I step back from the calendar and I'm like, okay, we got Reggie on Friday, Kelsey on Tuesday, John the next Friday, and I just kind of build out my schedule, which allows me to take days off if I'm sick, if I want to go on vacation, because I create 100 and something videos a year. So
you do at least 3 a week?
Just 2.
Just 2, okay.
Yes. And 2, and for what I do, that's more than enough. So, because my Friday videos especially are usually videos that take anywhere from 20 to 60 hours to make, just for the Friday videos.
Oh, sure. We're talking about if there's any writing involved, shooting, editing, gameplay capture, editing the gameplay. Yes. Long form videos I want to impart to the audience. Let's just say produced videos, not podcast videos, not Let's Plays. We can argue about how produced Let's Plays are, but the videos that you're talking 20-minute videos can take tons of time to do for one video. It's rough.
It's true. Well, so today, and to give you an idea, today I released a Let's Play video I shot last week with Reggie. We're playing Outlast. New game. That's basically, if you look at all the time just for that Let's Play, it's an hour of shooting, and then it's 2 hours of editing, which is pretty quick, right? But lining things up, fixing audio, color correction, that sort of stuff. A little bit of animation here and there. Then it's uploading, which takes, for a 4 gig file, takes about half an hour to an hour, maybe 2 hours, something like that. Thumbnail creation. Then it just goes live this morning. Then I'm on social media. Then I'm at 6:30 a.m. I'm up and I'm posted on Patreon, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, answering people's questions, blah, blah, blah. So people don't realize that the amount of work, just even for a Let's Play that I just did, we're saying 5-6 hours of total work that thankfully it's my job to do that, and I absolutely love to do it. But that's a quote unquote simple video.
But that's your simple video. Let's talk about then your buying guides, or we're talking then. You are quintupling the amount of time on those videos.
Yeah. So let's talk about like what goes into like say a buying guide I'm working on. So I'm going to do a buying guide on the Commodore 64. So for that, I have a rule. I like to show what I'm talking about if possible, because I think that's what's kind of unique about my channel is that we are collectors. And if I can show the game, if I can show the system. So the Commodore basically had 4 different models of system. Well, we only had 2 when I started. The portable version is very expensive. So what I end up doing is I go into this sort of mode where I'm starting to collect things and acquire the assets that I need on eBay, looking to see, okay, what are my top 10 games that I would recommend to people? Can I capture the footage? Can I buy those games? Are they even available? The answer is obviously sometimes no with Commodore. Then there's a bunch of research. I try to learn as much as possible. I grew up with the Commodore, so it's kind of easy for me, but I may not know the ins and outs of, say, the Commodore 128, which had a Commodore 64 in it, or the Commodore C, which is the modern version of that, or, and also too, like for instance, with this one, I want to talk about the SD drives that you can get for the Commodore. So I had to buy a couple SD drives.
So we're talking a monetary investment when you're doing these videos as well. And yes. While this could be tax deductible, it's still money out of your pocket.
Oh, absolutely. And I've been doing that for a long time. Is that, like if we're going to do, a hidden gems video for the PlayStation 4, we're showing those games. We bought them. Now, often they're from my collection, but, often I have like a long-term vision. I have a list of 30 videos I'm working on, and so, or more. And so I know, okay, well, next time GameStop has a buy 2, get 1 free sale, I'll pick up these titles that I'm looking for. And this is often 2-3 months in advance, And so I'm usually projected way out. So the Commodore 64, to give you an idea, I bought the portable version of it last year. Kinsey, who was working on this video, bought the Commodore 64C last year. And so these are videos that we work sometimes a year in advance on to make sure that we can do right.
So you're managing, like you said, 20 to 30 video ideas. I'm guessing you look at all different types of consoles. You can do them buying guides and top 10 hidden gems for all the variety of dozens of retro game systems. So then you have to start realizing, okay, if I'm 10 months out from even wanting this video to come out, I have to start acquiring all these games and all the hardware before I can even think about shooting this with a person or by myself. So we're talking backtracking way in advance, which is admirable, because usually with the process for traditional retro game reviews, whether it's something I do or something like James Rolfe does, all we have to worry about is, do we have that one game? Right. Or, do we have the console for that one game? We usually have the console ready. And then if at most we have to buy that 1 or 2 or 3 games for it. You're talking about buying all the hardware on top of buying all the games you show. And if you're doing a buying guide, you can be talking, a couple dozen different games that you have to make sure you have?
Not necessarily, because I think people who hear that might be going, wow, that sounds like a lot of money. How much does this guy make? But
you're a millionaire.
The truth is, actually, I don't drop a ton of money, because obviously that would not make me very much money if, in the YouTube ad revenue world. But to that point, though, that's the reason why people like John Hancock are so handy. The guy has 11,000 games, and his collection complements mine really well. And actually, most of the people on my channel complement my collection really well. So, for instance, I did a video very recently with Reggie, where we talked about some of the most rare and expensive PlayStation 1 games. I didn't have to contribute a game to that at all. Reggie already owned them. He's been collecting them for years. And so, and we're also going to be doing a video on the DS and some of the more collectible games. Kelsey already has those. She has the really expensive games. So I'm very practical about it. I don't, let's put it this way. If I was going to do a top 10 rare, expensive NES games, I'm not going to buy any of them. John Hancock already owns them all. So that's a very easy one for he and I to do. Recently, I did one with him with the N64. He has the complete collection, in box. So to answer your question, I don't typically want to go out and buy just 10 games, or drop hundreds of dollars, for a video, but
you just benefit from the community of other collectors around you. You're lucky to have a nice network of friends that you can help each other out.
Yeah, and and that's the part you're getting to before, is that I'm surprised other YouTubers don't do this. John Hancock is not super unusual in that regard. I mean,
no, he's unusual in that regard with the size of his collection.
I mean, not to discount John Hancock in any way, because his collection is pretty amazing. However, there are other mega collectors out there in the U.S. and the world that have, like, there's the Last Gamer in Australia. Like, I mean, he won. He's got the certificate, So if I was a YouTuber in Melbourne, Australia, wherever he's from, I would be bugging him to do videos because he's got an amazing collection.
Well, I think it's also a combination of things, right? So, for example, I'm in San Diego. Yes, there are other collectors out here in San Diego, but are they on YouTube? Do they want to do YouTube videos? Do they have the ability to do YouTube videos? Do they have a nice online presence? You're in a very unique situation that I don't see that often, where you're like, oh yeah, down the street, you're one of the bigger collectors. Oh, by the way, John Hancock's one of the nicest guys on the planet. On top of that,
totally.
And there's a lot of things that goes into this. I've seen collectors more often than not, snipe, backstab each other. It sounds like you have a nice group of people that are actually very nice, genuine, and really just love retro games without any sort of pretentiousness or any ulterior motives. And that's, to me, less common than you unfortunately see out there. And then when you throw YouTube into the mix, and then potential drama and maybe egos getting in the way, it can be a really bad stew that I've seen happen on other channels, not yours, where it's like, yeah, there's a group of people making videos, and sometimes it falls apart. So, no, I'm actually glad that you have a nice balance with everyone.
Well, here's what I would say to that, Pat. It's nice of you to say that, however, it's not true. So there are people who are no longer on my channel because of that reason. And so every once in a while, somebody will be like, hey, how come you don't have this particular person on anymore? And it's for the reasons that you said, that we either didn't gel, or there was tension, or it just didn't feel right. And so, and that's back on me as a producer. Nothing, sometimes the chemistry is just not there, or they're not right for my channel. And that's why I do have a lot of people on my channel, because, some people work out, some people don't. You never know. But the core people, the Kinseys, the Kelseys, Reggies, John Hancocks, man, they are rock solid. We are friends first. There's no tension there. And also, too, I'm very happy to promote them, too. And in everything that they do, I want them to succeed just as much. And so it's as much as they contribute to me getting subscribers and the views and all that, I want to give back to them as well. It is a community. I see these people many times throughout the year. So we're friends first, for sure.
Man, I guess you're lucky. I mean, like you said, not everyone works out, but in general, you found a nice, solid group. And I'm sitting here in San Diego. This isn't a woe is me. There's like no one out here. Ian has, his job at the store, and he's heard a lot. And the other collectors in San Diego, most of them don't like me. So it's like, it's a rough spot. But whatever. That's why I like talking to you guys. I'll live vicariously through someone like you that has a nice community. So what do you have going on? Anything in the future besides the 20 to 30 different reviews and buying guides you have lined up?
Yeah, well, that keeps me busy,
Here it is. New videos Tuesday and Friday. There it is on your page. I see it. All
right. Well, to give you an idea, like, for instance, we're talking about community and stuff like that. So typically I have thrown a party at my house and invited people over to come hang out and,
I've never been invited before, Jason.
Have you been on my channel officially?
I don't make it up to Seattle enough. I got to go up there.
Yeah. So for this year, I decided I was going to do something different. So I basically rented out a vacation home in Oregon on the beach. And I rented out for 5 days, which is not cheap. And, to house 10 plus people. And I've invited them to come down to do that this summer. So, as a huge thank you, we're going to go down there, sleep in, play video games, shoot videos, be stupid. And I think I'm really looking forward to it. So that's going to be this year's thank you for those guys.
It sounds like a plot to a horror movie with some retro gaming stuff thrown in. Like two of you end up dragging yourselves out alive. The rest was gone.
See, I can't tell you the address, so you'll show up with a hockey mask and like a machete or something just to scare people.
I'll try to find that copy of the box soft porn I've been looking for. Someone there owns it. Who has it? Speaking of finding rare stuff, I mean, you live in the mecca of that because of the proximity to obviously Nintendo of America's U.S. headquarters, and you've come across some really nice stuff. Let's just say, partially because of that.
Yeah, well, I know. So you're referring to the 64DD drive, and absolutely true. But more than that, though, obviously, people forget Microsoft is here, and my buddy Emilio found that literally one of a kind official Halo Orange Xbox at a garage sale for $20. And essentially what that was the guy who was in charge of marketing and making some of these test Xboxes had a buddy who was a Halo fan and used their official printer to put Halo on that orange Xbox. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's official. It works. It's got the Halo logo on there. It's all legit. And again, Emilio bought that for $20, turned around and sold it to a local preservationist for much, much more.
Much more monies than what he found it for.
Yeah.
I'm thinking at some point, these people that run these garage sales, and this goes back to 10, 15 years ago, what that one person found was he found the Campus Challenge and the Star Fox competition carts all at one garage sale. Eventually, these people are going to have to start turning shotguns and pitchforks on you when they come to the garage sales. I think it's one of those really weird things. And this orange Xbox, it was confirmed that this was the only one that was ever produced.
Yeah, so on Assembler Games, it got originally posted on there because people are like, what is this, right? What the heck's going on? Well, I think it's in the Wikipedia article, but you can follow the link and the guy who made it, who was in charge of it. It's actually pretty interesting because he also shows photos of a glow-in-the-dark original Xbox that they were working on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like white but kind of see-through and it glows in the dark. And he shows racks of these things that they were testing out. Some of the really weird green ones, the solid, like the when they were doing the Mountain Dew ones and stuff. So yeah, it's confirmed.
That's fantastic. Yeah, looking at Wikipedia, looks like they may have made more, but they were destroyed potentially. This is the only one that survived. Wow, that's nuts. Absolutely insane. It's interesting. That's pretty much my cutoff for retro gaming. I consider the Dreamcast the last retro game console. Otherwise, good thing I have to probably try to collect some of these different multicolored Xboxes at some point.
I know.
It's one of those things that, okay, once you start collecting hardware variants, now you're in trouble. Especially up to this day when you see like the Sony PS4 Star Wars Darth Vader edition stuff that comes out, and then then they had that, what is it, the 20th anniversary PlayStation PS4 version that went for a ton of money. It's like, oh my god.
The Taco Bell one. The Taco Bell one people really, really want.
Xbox? There was a Taco Bell Xbox?
No, it's a PS4, but
really?
Basically, yeah, there was a Taco Bell, and actually it looks pretty cool. And I'm not sure how you got that, but people really, really want that. That's going to be super collectible in the future, too.
Capcom Taco Bell limited edition gold PS4 console.
Yep.
$800 people want for it on eBay. Wow.
And it only came out, I think, last year. So, again, project that into the future.
Woo. Yeah, that's something I definitely want to get into. So let me ask you about where you see the future of retro gaming. Where do you see it trending? Do you see it continuing on the path now? Do you see maybe, for example, the Xbox and the PS2 becoming more in line with what the current hot retro gaming console is? Or you see it sort of being down the same line where, as well, we're going to stick with 16 and 8-bit, and that's where it's going to stay?
Well, let me tell you, Pat. Did I ever think that cassettes and VHS would be collectible? No.
Are cassettes officially collectible now?
They are officially collectible. So I go to a local record store because I collect vinyl. And again, 10 years ago, you couldn't give away vinyl. Now people are paying $20, $30 for new vinyl.
Oh, sure.
But at the same record store, they also blow out tons and tons of cassettes. And people collect VHS, Laserdisc. the CEDs. It's just like amazing to me. So, you know what the answer is? Anything that is of your childhood that takes you back to that, I think will continue to be collectible. For my dad, it was slot cars. You know, we've seen it time and time again. You know, I think what we should be doing is looking at the 16-year-olds today, or maybe the 18-year-olds today, you know, and what are they going to be nostalgic about in 4 or 5 years when they have a job and they want to buy back their childhood? Is that going to be PS2? Yeah, probably. Xbox? Sure. You know, I think it'll be really interesting though when you get to the really young, like the 10-year-olds who have never owned a physical thing. It's all been Steam. It's all been online and digital only. It's all been iPad and iPhone. What are they going to do? I don't think they're going to have a chance in hell.
Kids who have not grown up with physical media may not have that same attachment to it. So when they
won't be able to, because it literally won't work. You know, I mean, iPhone games. I'm sure you have iPhone games or Android games that just from a couple of years ago, because the operating system's been updated, don't run anymore. You know.
Sure. Yeah, me and you have talked about, and this goes for PC games as well, where people try to keep the servers online. They try to get, with the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, they try to get exclusions so that they could, you know, run servers just so people can still play these games in the future. Some of these games, that, you know, ones that require a server, or even this is both console and PC, for example. You know, they just shut off. What was it? A couple years ago, they shut off the Mario Kart Wii servers. We're talking about a game that came out less than 10 years ago.
Well, there's a version of Outrun, too, on the Xbox 360 that is fantastic that just got pulled because I think they lost the license to Ferrari. And so if you happen to have downloaded it, great, good on you. But I think at this point, everyone else is screwed, which sucks.
So kids basically can't sell their consoles or throw out their iPhones where they have these games on them. They'll never be able to play again in 20 years. That's what it's going to turn into. So
that's true.
They're going to so the software is going to be gone, physical software, but the hardware is never going to leave. They're going to be lugging around. You know, they're going to have like 15 of their old phones. They're going to, or either that, they're going to have to go back and find on eBay. There'll be listings in 20 years maybe. You know, iPhone 4 that has Flappy Bird 1.0 rare. You know that.
You know what, Pat? So you have the internet up. I'm kind of curious. Go to eBay and try to find a copy of PT on PlayStation 4, because that's exactly what you're talking about.
Because they pulled it. They pulled the demo. That's right.
They pulled it. So, but you know, but more than that, I mean, it's like, yeah, even if it was attached to your account, you can't download it at all. So, because I stupidly deleted it, right? So, and it shows it's sitting in my account. It mocks me, but it won't let me download it. So are people selling PlayStation 4s with PT on it?
They're trying to. $350 your best offer. PlayStation 4 Jet Black, 500 gigabytes with PT. They mentioned it specifically to entice people. I don't know. It can go either way. It can go where people are like, nah, this is stupid. I don't want to worry about it. As long as like someone like, I don't know if someone like, was PT? That was Konami, right? So as long as in the future they're like, okay, we're going to re-release it 10 years from now on a special, maybe they'll have a special Dead Games Edition disc. Where you know what I mean? Like, maybe they'll do something like that. Where they'll have these re-releases come out where you can play all these games in the future, company by company. I don't know.
Okay, so that is perfect segue into limited run games. This is why, no matter what you think of limited run games, I happen to really like what they do. That they're doing the Lord's work. They're trying, you know, through their system of limited printing of this stuff, is to put these games on physical. You know, they have to be the full versions, the patch versions. There you go. Put it on your shelf. You own it for real.
Sure, I agree with it in theory. I just wish they made enough so everyone who wants one can get one. I wish
that would be limited.
No, but if I see, you see, it can still it can still be limited if they sell more after the fact. They'll just stop selling when people don't want them anymore.
So, I mean, here's what they should do. I have a solution. Do you want to hear it?
On demand?
No. Okay. They need to do so. Vinyl records have solved this problem, and vinyl records is the same thing. So you probably don't collect records, do you?
Ian does. I don't.
Okay, so every year they have Record Store Day, and that one day of the year they have a bunch of exclusive, limited pressings of albums, and they do hundreds of them. Sometimes by big, you know, the Rolling Stones and Nine Inch Nails and David Bowie and all this stuff, Prince. And what they do though is that is the limited run, and then after that, so it'll be colored vinyl. It'll be a cover that is somewhat special. It is a true limited version of that. But if you actually want to listen to the music, throughout the rest of the year, they typically print them off, but they're in the normal black vinyl.
Oh, sure.
With some sort of that's what limited run should do.
They should go to the market where it's quote unquote there's a limited edition of it, but we'll still make more if you want them.
The only thing I would say though is that Doug and those guys who by the way, limited run is only a 2-person company, so I know Doug, and so the way that limited run works is that they actually put up their own money. All of the risk for every single release is on them. And initially they were doing that like basically on credit cards. And so they need to make sure that these things sell out. That's the reason why the numbers go up and down and stuff. Anyways, and so what do you think would happen though if it wasn't limited anymore? How much do they put up? If I was to ask you, to put up some indie game, and by the way, you're gonna have to go get a bank loan. And how many copies of this game are you going to buy? Well, I don't know. Well, how many do you think you're going to sell?
But they have a track record now. They put out enough games where they know, okay, if we do this many pre-orders, we know this is how many it's going to sell in a certain amount of time. Now it's less of a risk, and now they have capital to play with. So I think at this point, I'm not saying at some point you have to grow the business, and I don't know the guys. Ian knows them. I'm not criticizing them on directly, because I know what it takes to, again, risking your own money to do this. But I think now's a time where if they want to take this to the next level, they have to appease a larger customer base. At some point you have to take calculated business risks.
Well, let me ask you this, and I'm not disagreeing. I'm just trying to illustrate the how difficult the problem is. Let's say this. So that they're going to be doing Night Trap, okay?
Yeah, sure.
But let's say Pat is going to release a limited run of Night Trap, okay? And you're going to pay for it, okay? Tell me how many copies you should make.
You do a pre-order setup, right? So you at least are going to sell that many,
right?
I'm not sure how early in advance do they usually do their pre-orders, or do they not do them that often?
I don't think they do pre-orders at all. I think they basically just say, hey, we're going to sell this game twice on Friday.
Well, that's an issue to me then, because that's one of the reasons why, for example, on my DVDs and my book, I had to use, not just for promotion, but the reason you use Kickstarter or Indiegogo is because so you can gauge interest for how many to produce.
The other thing, yeah.
So for example, if Night Trap, if I know in the past I sold a certain amount of game that's not as popular as Night Trap, okay, that doesn't have the cachet of it, and Night Trap is now in the mainstream, I cover in the podcast, this is a game that people are going to want to get. I would probably want to get a version of this in some capacity, basically because, for example, when I play it on a modern PS4 or Xbox One, or if it ever comes out in the PC, it's going to look a hell of a lot better than it did in the early 90s on the crusty old Sega CD technology.
Yeah, the trailer actually looks pretty clean.
It looks clean. They went back and got the management. Remember there was a failed Kickstarter to remake it a few years ago, and actually me and Ian kind of criticized it because we're like, they don't have to put that much money in order to reproduce this. They have all the assets. They have all the video file. They just got to get some company to put this on disc and get it out there again, which is what basically has happened a couple years later without a Kickstarter. So this is what my advice: you have to do pre-orders. You absolutely have to do that. But then at some point though, you also have to realize that the more you produce, the cheaper they are to you overall, and that's for any media.
There's one piece to this. I'm playing devil's advocate here. I have no stake in limited run or anything. But the other thing is, because I've thought a lot about this as well, is that while Night Trap will probably sell fairly well, how many limited run releases do you think sell simply because it is limited? Like, we see people buying every single Vita release that comes out, regardless if even they played or if it's good or not.
Well, this gets into the issue I see, though, that people don't like the scalping market that's arisen with limited run. That there are people that are getting into it just so they think it's going to go up in value in the future versus actually wanting to play it. So these are things that, unfortunately, scalpers help limited run games to make sure they sell out of certain titles, but it pisses off people that actually just want it just to have one to play. They're not going to worry about their Star Trek collector's play. It's going to go up in value in 10 years. So these are things that you have to play with, obviously.
Yeah, and they've tried to battle that a little bit, I know, by trying to limit the number of people, and I'm sure they probably look at IP addresses and things like that to try to control it. But anyways, yeah. It's
hey, you want to bring me on as an investor? I'll be involved with these guys. Why not? I'll go in.
I don't have any pull like that. I just
Okay,
simply,
you know, there's I'm not saying there's not money to be made. All I know is that, you know, they can a pre-order system I think is necessary. Otherwise, if I did a certain NES guidebook and I didn't do a pre-order, how would I have to work it in every podcast? How would I know how many to have made if I didn't at least gauge, you know, preliminary interest? There'd be no way. It's a shot in the dark at that point. And again, and if I only, you know, if I printed 300 versus the you know thousands, then the cost goes up per book, you know, for everyone and for myself. So, and I know at the end of the day, most of the money here is in obviously licensing it versus the actual media production. That's the lower end cost as well. So at that point, it's just the risk of, okay, if I produce 5,000 versus 3,000, can I move that extra 2,000? And what's my extra cost per disc? That's what it comes down to. And if I have to hold on to them for a couple of years, maybe that's what has to happen, or maybe do sales every now and then. I want to talk to these guys. I want to help them out. I honestly do.
You know, it would be interesting if they went the sort of indie box route where basically they're like, well, you know what, 40, 60 bucks a month. You just get every release, you know, whatever makes sense. I don't know if it'd be $60 a month, maybe $100 a month. But it would be interesting if they basically just went, you know what, you're going to get the latest and greatest PlayStation 4 Vita release. Here you go. Or choose whatever format you want. And
yeah, or maybe they can do that with some of the overstock where they go, we'll do a package deal. It's out, you know, we're not going to say we have any left, but 6 months from now or a year from now, we have a limited number left and we'll bundle them together. And that way we make our money back, and people out there that didn't get a chance to buy it, they can also buy it.
And that's why I thought again, Vinyl Records has already resolved this, and that is having a truly limited version of it. And
the limited version.
and if you want to play it, right, then that's when you buy it 2 weeks later, but it's a different box or something like that.
All right, I'm gonna make this a public statement. Limited Run Games, I want to help you guys out. I'm not saying you got to bring me on as a partner directly, but I'll work this out with you guys. I'll be a consultant. I'll be a consultant for you guys, because I want everyone to have the games they want, especially for newer titles. And I think it's great for preservation, like you said, because at the very least we're going to have a nice backlog of these games, at least in a physical version, in the future, 20 years from now, that'll still exist.
Yeah, it's amazing how many Vita games I have now because of them. Like, it's like, you know, it's awesome.
And it keeps the console alive longer than maybe it traditionally would have been at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So maybe we'll see limited run Super Nintendo and Nintendo games in the future.
I get the feeling that Nintendo doesn't want to work with anybody like that for some reason. And I
do not.
I don't understand it, because you know, I mean, like the Switch, like I own a Switch. I'd love to get physical copies of some of these games, you know, like Wonder Boy, you know, Dragon's Trap. I'd love to have a physical version to sit on my shelf of that. It would be killer.
Well, it's more of a cost in production, obviously, delivery, mailing. It's just too much of a headache. I mean, hell, we saw Nintendo, you know, give up, to me, hundreds of millions of potential profit in the NES Classic Edition because it's not worth the trouble for them for a variety of reasons versus just offering on Virtual Console, and in their minds, hopefully making that money back, which they never will, but that in their mind is worth it. You know, versus dealing with, we got to make our 3DSs still, and the Switch, and the NES Classic Edition, and we don't need that. It's not worth it. And that's probably how they think. And that's why ladies companies in general will be like, okay, yeah, we're fine with you guys producing 500 or 1,000 copies of, what's this, Octodad Deadliest Catch for PS4. But, you know, we don't want to put, you know, 100,000 out there because it's not worth the risk to us. But we're gonna let Limited Run take the risk, though. They'll take the risk, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, again, why not? But for some reason, Nintendo just is not interested in that stuff.
Well, they're a very conservative, old school, maybe even say backwards company, which is funny because their products aren't backwards. They take risks. But in terms of actual business decisions, they don't like taking those risks. But, you know, hey, what are you going to do with that Nintendo, right? Hey, what are you going to do?
Yeah. Hopefully keep finding their stuff, their old stuff.
Man, you got to make it down to San Diego one day. You got to take a look at my my PC game collection, see what I have. Maybe we work out a trade.
Dude, one of my favorite videos on your channel is like this multi-part crate dig through your collection. Like, it was scary and awesome at the same time.
Did I get backlash for that? Because some people didn't realize that I was putting on partially and acting saying, I don't care about this, or I don't even know what this is. I know what all this stuff is. You know, that was technically a Pat the NES Punk video. People don't know, Ian was behind the camera and he hated me because that was like a 5-hour shoot going through all my stuff.
I was like shocked. I was like, holy crap. Like, Yeah, if you ever die, I hope to give me a call because I just want to dig through all your crap.
Do you want me to put you in my will? You get first crack at all of my Key Punch software games that are regional. You know what's funny about the Key Punch software? And I'll have to like text you a picture of a bunch of it just to get an idea of it. Is that this is something I would have thought of again until I realized it existed, and then I saw someone. I think it was like Classic Game Expo 2012. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. His name is Eli. He runs like Eli Software Encyclopedia. And he has just a ton of new old stock. Maybe not anymore, but this is to illustrate my point. A ton of new old stock games up to like the early 90s. We're talking, regional stuff like Key Punch. We're talking, I think I remember buying Zork 1 off of him, Infocon, sealed in box for like $15, $20 in 2012. We're talking, all those nice Taito, the ones that like record albums, they were very thin, square. All these, he had them all sealed. And so it was cool. He sent me a bunch of these Key Punch software. Like he sent me like 50 or 60 different ones. He just wanted, a little bit of advertising. He didn't want any money for it. Because he probably realized that no one else cares about this stuff. No one else is interested in it. Here's a guy that actually appreciates the stuff. He remembers them being in his old, B. Dalton bookstore computer, game section in 1986. Like who else is going to remember this besides some crazy guy on the internet?
Wow.
So
yeah,
I don't know if he's still around or still sells it, but yeah, he might have thousands of old games still. Now everyone's going to look him up after listening to this podcast and try to get this software from him.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. People are still out there. It's funny you mention that. There's a guy who goes to all the local Seattle expos, and he's kind of a buttoned up older gentleman, gray hair, looks like an engineer, and that's because he's an ex like Boeing engineer. But anyways, I see him all the time, and I've kind of introduced myself, bumped into him or whatever, and then later I learn that he has got one of the biggest collections in the world, and he basically has an airplane hangar somewhere in Seattle that it's like just packed to the rafters, but he's not interested in sharing it. I mean, I was told that because it was one of those sort of like hush hush. He's not really flashy. He's just buying stuff that he wants for his little big collection, and people are, every time he goes to these, people are just dying to know like what sort of mysteries does he have in this airplane hangar. It's like, I don't know. So they're out there.
Oh yeah, that's like I don't know if you follow the story of Tim Atwood last year in terms of NES and SNES collecting. A guy who had literally thousands of sealed NES games, multiples of extremely hard to find games like Stadium Events. He still owns a sealed shipping box, which means there's 6 sealed Stadium Events inside of those. Now, each one of those, if they sold separately without knowledge that there were others existing, he could get maybe $30,000 each for those. If you can find collectors that are willing to drop that, but the last seal one went for probably around that mark, if not more. So, but he has tons of these. Like I said, these people are out there. They're not like us that do YouTube videos. They're not people that are braggarts or want to show off their collection. They just like their collection. They like going out to their barn or, like you said, their hangar and taking a look at it and just appreciating it for what it is. At some point, though, it'd be nice to have others be able to enjoy them at all as well, be a museum, donation. And that's where I'm getting to with at least my console collection, is that I'm at the stage now where it's cluttered. You saw from that collection video, and that was almost 5 years ago, and now it's worse than that. I need to move into a bigger place, but at some point, what good does it really do for me to own all these rare, sometimes almost one-of-a-kind items if I'm the only one that's experiencing it?
Yeah, and actually, that's where I'm at. Yeah, and John Hancock's the same way. People are like, is he a hoarder? No, actually, he's, he's been collecting since the early 90s, and so that's, because he always gets, are you a hoarder? Are you rich? And the answer to that is no, he's not rich. He's a teacher. but his thing is that he wants to do a museum as well. And that would be amazing. Like, that would be awesome. And he wants to do it in his local little town, and he wants to be the curator for it. And man, it'd be killer. It's like, that's what it should be. People can go pay a couple bucks, keep it so it's maintained, and just see this stuff it'd be awesome.
That's the future. Where all of us are going to have our nice little regional museums that we're just going to, pay $4, come on in, play the consoles, sample all the games, take a look at all the rare antiquities behind glass. That's where we're gonna look out for that. So you're gonna be opening up your big box PC collection and museum in 2028. We'll be looking forward to that.
Yeah, I got to say, sitting in my game room, sitting on the couch, kicking back, looking at it, it is that awesome feeling that I've never. It's just like a dream. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, this is pretty cool to be here. I got my turntable, got my Def Leppard albums. I'm set.
I think that's where I get more enjoyment now, where like everyone who wants to come over and take a look at it who hasn't. For example, I've had guests over, YouTubers like 8-Bit Alley, for example, who's very funny. Someone like Andre Meadows, Black Nerd Comedy. I'm like, oh, I want to see the game room. To me, it's like, it doesn't matter. I don't like coming here and looking at stuff. But to them who haven't experienced it, they haven't, pieced it together over 20 plus years. To them, it's an accomplishment. It's something to gawk at. For me, it's just like gathering dust now. It's hard. Let's just say, put it this way. It's hard to keep it fresh. It's like keeping a marriage fresh. It's like, how do you keep it fresh that I own all these things where you can almost get overwhelmed by the vast quantity of it, where it's just
you know what I'm hearing, Pat?
What?
I'm hearing a massive sell-off is what this is. Oh, interesting.
Now you want to take a trip to San Diego. Is that what it is?
Dude, I love San Diego, man. It's like my wife goes down every year for a real estate convention.
Oh, nice.
And sometimes I go with her. And fantastic city. We love it there. Best fish tacos in the world.
Oh, okay. You got to come to South Beach. If you're in San Diego, South Beach Bar and Grill, best fish tacos in the city, in my opinion. Best nachos I ever had. Carne asado nachos that are piled high. And now I'm starving. All right. Well, you got to let me know when you're down here. If you make it out to a convention, I got to get up there for the something in Seattle again. I haven't been up in Seattle since that PAX Prime 6 years ago, and I always miss out. When's the Seattle Retro Gaming Expo? When is that usually?
Coming soon. It's in June, and I don't know the date, but it's like seattleretro.org, I believe. Seattle Retro is interesting. It's been in transition in the last couple of years, and so I would say it's hard for me to recommend you come up just for that, because like I said, it went through a bit of an ownership change. It's been changing a lot of locations. It's been going through some growing pains. And so, obviously come to Seattle for our beautiful city and retro gaming, and go take your picture, go have your picture taken at Nintendo and all that stuff. But The thing is for us too is that Portland is so awesome. The Portland Retro Gaming Expo is hard to beat.
Portland is so great, seeing it grow from, I was like one of the first quote unquote YouTube guests there that first year.
I think I went to your talk.
Do you remember how the sweat dripping off of me?
That's right, because they had the air conditioning was terrible because it was in a DoubleTree, right?
It was underneath the parking garage.
Yeah,
I don't think there was air conditioning. It was just fans running, and it was unseasonably hot for October. It was like 90 degrees plus with, what was there, like hundreds of people packed into that little location.
Yeah.
And like, if you go back, and it's probably online where you can see me talk, I have like a paper towel next to me or napkins. I'm constantly, I'm seriously dripping sweat, but it was a ball though. It was a blast. That was one of my first, panels I had ever done. It was probably my third or fourth, because I'd gone to, I think, my first MagFest before that, I think maybe 2010 or 11, and I'd done SGC 2010. So I'm always going to be loyal to them. They're great. They took a chance on me, had me out. It was hopefully entertaining. They had that kid who always antagonizes me now. I see him grow up year after year. You know what I'm talking about. Every year at my panel in Portland, he'll talk trash at me, and it's become a tradition. I see him growing up from when he was like 8 years old. Now he's like in high school. It's so weird. But no, I guess that the Northwest was always ahead of the curve when it came to retro gaming. It seemed like it was one of those areas that was ahead of the curve, was always, maybe it's because of the geeky culture, counterculture sort of feeling of, Portland, and maybe to a lesser extent Seattle. It really gelled there versus other parts.
We have 300 game development studios here.
Oh, that helps too.
Yeah, and Nintendo's been here since the 80s, Microsoft and all that stuff. But yeah, wargaming.net, if you play World of Tanks, here, tons of people play that game, and the list goes on and on and on. PopCap and all that stuff are all here. So mobile games, it's pretty. So you're right. It's like we are video game culture here for sure.
Yeah, in San Diego, you just have, I think, one of the Rockstar divisions is in San Diego, quietly. Yeah, Rockstar San Diego, and then other than that, I think you have Mad Cats, who I think are just shutting down finally after all these years. I believe Mad Cats are going out of business.
Oh, like the controller maker.
Yeah, they're in San Diego, but I think they're finally done.
Wow.
Yeah,
that sucks.
But so that's really the San Diego video game development scene. Is that
and Pat.
Oh, and Mega 64. Good old Mega 64. I always say San Diego YouTubers. It's Mega 64 on top, and then you have me swimming on the bottom, and that's really all the ones I know off the top of my head when it comes to gaming YouTubers. But you sound like every other block. You have someone nice that you can hang out with, reminisce, and make great YouTube videos of. Well, this was fun, Jason. This is fantastic. We definitely need to talk more in the future. Find a reason to get together at some point as well. Hopefully this year at Portland, if I'm back, it won't be me trying to just sell a certain NES guidebook the whole weekend and literally deliver a ton of books there and set them up. Maybe I can actually relax this year a bit and hang out like I used to be able to years back before it became, oh, now it's my business. I have to, basically take it 100% seriously. I need to work in the sort of leisurely side of it again, like I used to be able to, walk around and actually buy, big box PC software and handheld games and stuff like that.
Well, I can relate too, because I would not want to go to an expo being a collector and want to have to quote unquote work it, because I can imagine that's not what you want to do there. Although I will say I do absolutely love your book. It is super high quality. It's amazing. It's funny because I was listening to the podcast episode that you did with Mark from Classic Game Room, and he couldn't shut up about it because he loved it so much. And I was like, I know, it's like impressive. And to that point, I will say, I know you get shit for pimping it in your videos and the podcast. Don't apologize for that shit because it's good. It's really good. You did a great job, and you should be proud.
Oh, I appreciate that. Maybe we can work on a big box PC book at some point. We can take pictures and do.
Don't tease me, bro.
Well, hey, why not? I've had multiple people talk about ever wanting to do a book about whether it's toys or arcade machines or Atari, and I'm like, it's a lot of work, but I think if you commit yourself to doing it, you'll find it's really cool to get through it, and I think people will appreciate it. Yeah, I didn't know, not talk about the book too much, but I really did not know if I'd sell 100 copies or 200. I had no idea people were interested in a book like that. I just didn't know until I took the risk and did it. Then did the Kickstarter and say, oh wow, I met the goal in 24 hours. Okay, there's an interest here. I just didn't realize it. So fortunately, physical media for books isn't dead yet. It's not like, oh, we all just want to look at Kindles and iPads. There's something about holding a physical book. I don't think that's ever going to go away.
And now I'm kind of curious, how is the app done for you? Because that's a whole other beast, right?
The app, I actually have not actively promoted the app as much as I should have, because there's still little bugs here and there to work out, and it's still not to my standards in terms of, it works great. But there's little features that are not yet 100% functional that I want to get in there before I really tell the world. For example, I haven't even told the original Kickstarter backers of the book, and that was like 2,000 people, about the app. And that's obviously the prime audience. The app is doing okay. It's still selling every day, but it's a different world, obviously. Yeah. Like it's a lot harder to push an app. Not everyone wants an app. It's more of a collector's guide versus a reference guy like the book is. So it's a different product entirely. But no, it's doing okay. I'm not complaining.
I'm just kind of curious because I could imagine the amount of work, because you probably had to pay somebody to make that for you, obviously.
Yeah, sure. We have a revenue split, so it works out like that. Where okay. So like obviously the app can't be done without someone developing it, but it can't be done without me putting years into getting all the information from the book. So and plus we both worked on the design together, and and obviously after you do iteration after iteration, you discover, oh well, we don't have these arrows to quickly navigate from one collection screen from one game to the next. That's something we should put in. So it's more of an evolution. I'm guessing that's what game design is. What you know more about than me is like, it's an evolution where you don't think about these things until you actually see it in front of your face and realize, oh, it might be easier if we insert this function, or it'll be easier for the user if we do that. So it's definitely an interesting world to get into. I wouldn't mind doing another type of app, or maybe even doing a game at some point, on the development side, with maybe write the story, but it's definitely different than doing YouTube videos, and it's definitely even different than doing a book. Definitely.
Yeah, Well, I know because in the real estate technology company that I worked at, we did an app, and we also did all of our websites and stuff like that. And so I know a bit about the difficulties of doing that just on smartphones alone on the Android side.
Oh, nightmare.
It's a nightmare, and people have no idea that there are literally like 100 versions of Android, and so people beat us up because we would do iOS versions first. We'd be like, yeah, because we only have to do 3.
Oh, sure. We did.
So I imagine,
yeah, we did, I think, one iOS to start. We're going to do an optimized iPad version at some point. But yeah, people were waiting on the Android version, and it was like a month later. And then the update, there's like issues with different types of phones where there's memory leaks on a certain Samsung phone, so it would crash after using it for a few minutes. We've sorted it all out now, but it's definitely gone a lot slower than I imagined, and even the developer imagined, because I don't think some of these issues until you test them on specific phones. It's
right.
Just nuts. So for everyone out there developing apps, my heart's out to you, at least on the Android side. And now I know why probably Nintendo took time to for the Android one to come out for Super Mario Run versus the iOS. It's not just time exclusivity. They had to test this all on multiple types of phones, and you got to make it backwards compatible to a certain certain OS on the Android side. It's just, oh my God, it's just.
Yeah, I was curious how that was going, so that's why I asked.
No, I'll get you. Do you have Android or iOS?
iOS.
You do. It's almost like I want to give people the iOS codes, but unfortunately, when you give someone a download code for the iOS version, you can't update it. I don't think. Android, you can update it. So, like, if I gave you an iOS code, I'd have to seek out everyone again and give them another code for the next version of the app when it's out.
Well, how pimp your app? How much is?
Oh, it's $4.99.
Okay, well that is completely reasonable. So
yeah,
okay,
you know
cool.
what? I've had maybe 2 people complain and leave comments that, oh, this should be cheaper, and I'm like, I think I'm okay with it, because if I have 2 complaints out of, I don't know how many people have downloaded so far, 1,000, something like that, maybe a little less. 2 out of that, it's not bad. And when I show it off in person at panels and I tell people the price, people are like, oh, that's pretty good. They expect it to be higher price, which fine, all right, I'll raise it to $8.99. Why not?
You know what? I don't get that mentality, because people will pay $4.99 for that mocha, that unicorn mocha thing at Starbucks. Maybe it's even more than $5. They suck it down in 10 minutes, get a sugar high, and then they're on their way. You know what I mean? It's like, and this is an app that people can use for.
Well, retro gamers in general are known to be a little more stingier than Starbucks drinkers.
No,
so believe it or not, I don't get insulted by that. But when I was at Retropalooza Houston, someone insulted me by complaining about the price of the book right to my face. He said, like, ooh, yeesh. And I was just like, serious? I don't like to call people out when they do that, but I feel like saying, though, do you know what goes into not just making the book, but the cost of producing books of this size?
Yeah.
I feel like saying, do you remember textbooks when you were in college and how they cost $150?
Or more, $300 now for some. Yeah.
So I mean, I think I'm happy with keeping the price point $59.99 for a book that's 440 pages. That's 9 by 12 hardcover, and no one picks it up and says this is a cheap book or this is not made well. Like, no one says that. So
I think it's the biggest book I've ever owned. I mean, the only thing you can equate it to is like the phone book for all of Seattle and Puget Sound. You know what I mean? That's the only thing that would come close to it.
Now, phone books for those out there used to be these big yellow things that you would look up phone numbers.
They would throw it at your door and you'd trip over it as you walked in, with trying to get home.
They still deliver them in San Diego. You get one every year or two. I'm just like, do people need these anymore at this point?
We banned them in Seattle.
Did you really? Well, you guys are ahead of the curve when it comes to environmentalism. You guys were recycling like in the 70s probably. But yeah, it's just like I'm thinking about all the waste, not just for like the trees, and I'm not even concerned about that. The waste and just time and money to get all this stuff made and put out there when everything's online now. It's just So like whenever I get my phone books in the past, I would just throw them on top of the refrigerator. And then, like, they would pile up. I'd have, like, 8 of them before I just toss them into the recycler. It was just bad. But anyway, yeah, the book is great. One of the reasons why I think I wanted to do the Super Nintendo book is that I think now people enjoyed this one. Besides, I know there's a market for there. I think people, retro gamers, deserve the same quality for the Super Nintendo at least. So I think I can have the opportunity to deliver at least on that as well. So that's why I want to do that.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Also, too, that gets back to the NES Mini. Is that I didn't get an NES Mini because for me, I don't have a lot of nostalgia for that, and also too, I don't think that the games hold up quite as well as, say, the Super Nintendo. I think the Super Nintendo today, those games are still fun, still look great, and that's my system for Nintendo that I like to collect for. And so I think if you're thinking, if Nintendo's sitting there thinking, yes, a Super Nintendo Mini is a good idea, yes, it's a good idea, your book would also be a good idea for that too, because I just think that it's going to have longer longevity. Are you saying
the NES hasn't had longevity? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that I like to play Excitebike.
Okay. But you like to play F-Zero more. Is that what
Super Metroid, that's the game.
Yeah, I think it always comes down to when you say games hold up versus if a game is well designed, to me it's timeless. So Legend of Zelda, to me, I enjoy Legend of Zelda more than Link to the Past. I honestly do. Maybe it's the simplicity. Maybe I remember when my father brought it home from, was that Kitty City, Lionel Kitty City in New Jersey. To me, that I just still enjoy that. I can go back and play that. Maybe there's something to be said for the simplicity of some of the games.
Compare the Final Fantasy games that were on the NES to the Super Nintendo. I mean, Final Fantasy 3 on Super Nintendo, I guess it's 6 or whatever that is. That is an amazing looking game, and it's more complex. It still has the grinding, but I definitely prefer that over the simplistic RPGs that are on the NES, the Dragon Warriors. I can't get into them quite as much.
Sure. I mean, I think it also varies by genre. So, for example, I'm looking at right now a 5-star game according to a certain NES guidebook, a shooter, Gunnat. I'd put that up against any shooter on the Super Nintendo, and you'd be hard-pressed to say this game is that much worse than the best Super Nintendo shooter. So you're talking about shooters, though. You have to move to the Genesis. Let's be honest. Okay, yes. Compared to the Super Nintendo, yes, the Genesis has a lot better shooters, or obviously the TurboGrafx-16. But I'm just saying, though, I think it's harder to compare. I think it's more by generation versus even console, because a lot of the later NES games look really good. Mr. Gimmick is an outstanding game, and you wonder how they made that on an 8-bit console, for example. Game I did a review of about 4 or 5 years ago.
I remember that review.
Oh, wow. All right.
I do.
You watch some of the old school Pat the NES Punk reviews.
Dude, speaking of old school, okay, let's do this before we wrap this up. I've been dying to know. That porn star video.
She was not a porn star. She was a dominatrix.
Fair enough. Okay, so she didn't have sex on camera. My bad. I'm sorry. I don't know.
She might have done some things in other works, but at the time she was a working dominatrix and one of the nicest people I ever met, by the way. Besides putting up for me, and I paid her not that much to appear in that video versus her regular hourly wage just to act. And so she was such a super sport. I wish I still kept up with her.
So tell me, I think that video is hilarious that you even attempted to go there. And by the way, I'm not judging you in any way because, back in the crazy days of early YouTube, you're probably thinking, thumbnail. Woohoo!
Oh, that's one of my better videos. Unfortunately, it's been blocked from monetization for, I guess, sexual content, even though there's no real nudity. It's like, yeah, it's not really a battle I feel like fighting anymore. It's like, yeah, whatever. That's a lot of my earlier videos. I use more copyrighted music that got, so as you grow as a YouTuber, you learn not to do these things as much.
Right. But what was your thinking for that? Was it simply just to have the sexy girl as the, as the carrot?
You always think about that, of course, for marketing, and Ian always gives me signs of disapproval when I bring up that video, which was.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know if it's a touchy.
No, it's not a touchy subject at all. To me, I'm just saying that Ian's disapproval of that video. Whatever he will say it, but he's like, "Come on, Pat, really? Are you better than that?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not better than that." No, but my feeling was this. My feeling was, the name of the character is Pat the NES Punk, right? If he's going to review a Genesis game. The most extreme thing he can think of doing in terms of outside the box, in terms of what would he be least likely to ever do, it would have to be under extreme duress. So why not under the duress of a hot dominatrix forcing him to do that with a whip?
And so And so you as a young YouTuber were like, how much money do I need to go get the sexiest woman possible that will essentially
she was not
take off her clothes?
She was not paid enough. You know what's funny about that was she actually had a dominatrix gig later that night, and so she wasn't running late, but you know, I paid her a little bit more than, because I think I only had her booked for an hour to shoot everything, and obviously my expectation, my at the time it probably went closer to 2, just because, you know, I got better as I went along, directing people to know how much time it actually will take. I was better at setting up shots and knowing the shots I wanted beforehand with other people. So it ran like 2 hours. I basically paid her for an hour and like 15 of her time. She basically just charged me here like regular, you know, wages for dominatrix stuff. I mean, how else are you going to do it? Probably a little bit less because she realized I wasn't, you know, I wasn't touching her. She wasn't touching me.
Yeah.
You know, at least what was in the script. She did spank me, but that was part of the script. You know, so. I unfortunately learned some things about myself, like I didn't mind getting spanked in the making of that video. But then again, it was hard to walk the next day because we did that.
See,
we did that take like
you're
3
learning.
times. Yeah,
Pat, you're learning and growing.
I always wonder when I do those videos, like, would I do that video nowadays? It's you know, the difference between, I guess, you know, the videos that you do, for by and large, you know, they're not going to be scripted in terms of storyline versus something like me. And so I actually don't want to go back and watch videos I made 4, 5, 6 years ago, because I think my judgment is better, and also in terms of development as a writer have changed. So it's like, oh my God, I can't believe I even made that joke, or that didn't hit the mark, or this video is like that Mr. Gimmick video is long. And I made that video, I edited that video in about 24 hours before, honestly, I left before Portland Retro Gaming Expo. That's where I premiered that video. So you saw that in person if you're at my panel. But that video nowadays would not be an 18-minute video. I probably would cut it down to about 14 or 13. I'd cut out like 20, 30%, you know, and just make the points in a more quicker, succinct way and not kill myself. Right. You know what I mean? So,
yep.
But so would I have gone back and done that video with the dominatrix? Yeah, maybe. I probably would have cut it down a lot. You know, and maybe so
it does take a while to get to the hot lady. I got to be honest. Watching it today, I'm like, man, I'm skimming. What the hell? Where? Oh, okay. She's way at the end.
Oh, in terms of the striptease, yeah, it's you know.
Well, of course, that's what I'm looking for. Hello.
All right, so now we know what videos that you want me to do in the future. You want me to get well, I've had females in other videos before and after that. You know, you work them in there.
I know. I'm just teasing.
I know. Every time I talk to Frank's like, hey, when we get some broads in this video, Pat, I'm like, oh, geez, Frank, that's all you think. This isn't Hollywood. Just get hot girls in all your videos. This isn't how I'm going to shoestring YouTuber budget. You know, I'm not Philip DeFranco or someone getting millions of views a day. You know, I can work with it.
Which, I don't know if you saw this, but Philip DeFranco yesterday put out a video, basically major announcement, where he's creating a news network. He's going to Patreon for that.
Yeah,
he's changing things up quite a bit. I mean, I think that's our YouTube world. It was interesting to see.
If we had more time, we can talk about how YouTube's changed in general. I'll talk about it on the podcast with Ian. I have very mixed feelings about this. I think because there are, you know, YouTube quote unquote news channels that exist, and you can say that they are successful in terms of views, but they have their own slants on things. They probably don't have the same editorial process as a quote unquote tried and true mainstream media or legacy media outlet has. And it's a tricky thing once you declare yourself a news network. You have a lot more responsibility at that point, an obligation to be ethical, and you got to hire the right people. And you have to trust yourself, and you have to though be more. Let's put it this way: his accountability now is 10 times greater than what it's going to be before if he actually gets us off the ground.
Who was the young lady who was part of that network? It was like an online Facebook thing where she got fired because she was on The View talking about abortion and stuff like that. Did you?
Oh yeah, she was on what's his name? She was on, what was it? The Blaze, was it?
Yeah, The Blaze, and it was Bill O'Reilly. It wasn't. It was
not Bill O'Reilly.
I know
who runs The Blaze. What's his name? Who's come on? Glenn Beck. Glenn Beck, who's now sort of changed his mode into attacking Trump and trying to be a more dyed-in-the-wool conservative view. Yeah, she fired Tommy Lauren for saying that she was okay with abortion.
So the reason why I bring her up is because she is absolutely not like the traditional newscaster, right? She's very, she's on YouTube getting millions of views, doing, editorial comment, and she's absolutely very much right wing conservative, right? I mean, she, that's her thing. So I think what's interesting about Philip DeFranco is that he is going to try to ride the line. He's basically saying that he's going to try getting everybody in the same room, which I think that's a challenge. My God, like that guy, I don't know if that's going to work. I think right now people, I mean, if it does, great. But right now people seem to either be watching the left, you're either the Daily Show, or you're her, you know what I mean, or Fox News or something like that.
There isn't a big audience like something like the Young Turks that's borderline left wing, that definitely is liberal. Like usually this is how, unfortunately, how we're getting to hold the conversation in terms of political talk in general, caters towards what you want to hear. It's comfort food.
Yeah,
it's comfort food. Yeah. It doesn't challenge you necessarily. So if he's trying to engage in that sort of challenging sort of, okay, let's get people from all sides on, give people fair time, let's hash this out, I don't know if there's an audience for that in general, at least a large enough one, because I don't know if they're looking for that. So we'll see.
I mean, PBS kind of already does this. Whatever you feel about PBS, I do feel like that they're about as fair and balanced, truly, as I think that they come. That's how I feel.
The McLaughlin group. McLaughlin just passed away. I used to watch that.
And so look how successful PBS is. I mean, I love them, but most people, seem to kind of ignore it. So we'll sort of see what happens, with the Charlie Roses of the world. I mean, but anyways, and so I saw that announcement as something he's going to try, and I think he's going to try to do it mostly through Patreon. And you can't see the numbers of how much money he's making per month on his Patreon account.
Yeah.
But based on the number of people, I think he's probably making a decent amount.
Yeah, and that's where I think we're trending towards in terms of, if you can get the Patreon support, it's almost like, who cares about the YouTube views? For example, Colin Moriarty starting his own YouTube show up recently, based solely off Patreon. The views are not going to support him doing that full time at this point. But if he has tens of thousands a month on Patreon, that's going to do it. And if that's the new sort of public broadcast, that's the new PBS it's almost turning into. It's like, let's have individuals do it. So like I said, I'll talk about it more on the next CU podcast with Ian Ferguson if he wants to talk about it, if his guts aren't hurting him too much to talk about it. But we're definitely entering sort of this new territory now when it comes to this. I think in general, and I think if people want that reasonable voice, I'm all for that. That's what I've always tried to, at least myself, try to talk, maybe not down the middle, but try to reason out what's actually happening. And if you can call out the goods from both sides and the hypocrisies and bads of both sides, then I think then we'll see if people are open to that. Maybe there is that sort of silent majority out there that are wanting to do this, or at least that want this material. Then again, you can also say, well, maybe the true people that are more calm and rational, they don't want to seek that out, because they spend their time actually, doing fruitful things and spending their energy wisely versus going on Twitter and yelling about stuff. Like there's that argument to be made as well.
That's probably more like what it is, actually, but
which is how you get candidates that are usually, that cater towards the yelling people versus the people that are like, you know what, I'm more reasonable. I don't think I'm going to go to a rally and just yell for 4 hours. I have a job and a family I'd rather worry about. That's just the way I usually look at things like that.
Yeah, that's very true.
All right.
Well,
it was a fruitful conversation.
I know. We went all over the place. It's great.
We had some tech issues on the forefront. We worked them out. But thanks so much for spending the time to chat with me. Where can people find you on social media and on YouTube? Where can they hear your gaming and big box PC finds?
You can find me on MetalJesusRocks pretty much everywhere. I was smart enough to try to get that on every piece of social media. So YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, it's all MetalJesusRocks.
No Snapchat? You stay away from that?
I do have an account on there. I don't understand it.
That's how I know I'm officially old, because when people are like Snapchat, I'm just like, nope, officially old. Yeah. I don't get it. Sort of like back in the day, IRC, and growing up with ICQ and AOL Instant Messenger or Yahoo Messenger. Oh, yeah. I was there in the forefront of that technology. Snapchat, nope, yeah. I'm done. Instagram, I'm not even on board with Instagram. Twitter, Facebook, that's all I can stand. I can't even deal with having an Instagram and posting to that versus Twitter versus Facebook. Just can't do it.
Yeah, I'm with you. Actually, my two favorite are Twitter and Facebook. I like Facebook because most people are rational there, and I think it's because their mom is attached to their account.
I never.
So I think that keeps them honest. And then I like Twitter because everything has to be condensed down to what is this actually about? I like the 140 characters. Don't give me the fluff. Don't tell me your story. Just, post what you're
I
thinking.
think you can post funny cat memes.
Exactly.
All right, Jason, this was great. We'll talk again in the future, and hopefully, you can come down to San Diego. You can sample the great nachos I told you about, and then maybe check out my PC collection, maybe steal a game or two. Who knows?
Oh, my God. I would love that, dude. All right. Well, thanks for having me on your podcast, man. I appreciate it. It's awesome.
Thanks again to Jason for speaking to me this week. Check him out on Twitter and YouTube at MetalJesusRocks. If you enjoyed the Not So Common podcast, please subscribe on your podcast platform of choice, iTunes, Google Play, Podbean, Stitcher, or whatever you use to listen to them. You can rate the podcast and leave a comment to help give it a boost, and feel free to spread the word via social media to let others know how much you enjoy it. Finally, if you want to help directly support the Not So Common podcast, you can check out patreon.com/PatContry. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.